I failed my way to success. I just wasn't afraid to. I would always rather try than not.
Hebru Brantley is an American contemporary artist known for his distinctive narrative-driven work. He's had countless exhibitions to date, has collaborated with a host of brands that span from Adidas to Hublot, to name a few. His roster of notable collectors includes LeBron, Jay-Z and Beyonce, and George Lucas.
An artist is the griot of their time. The work that they do is representative of that time in which they existed in. I think my work generated a sense of hope and wonder. Once I kind of started to see that response that the work brought about in people, I really leaned into it. You don't want to like die and leave a legacy of your albums on a computer. Die empty.
What do you think is a thing that separates creatives that make it to the ones that don't?
It's a good question.
To whom much is given, much is required. Part of that requirement is sharing. Culture is the heartbeat within our lives, and it's at the core of so many things. While we live in a time when we are starving for wisdom, I welcome you to your wisdom retreat at Culture Raises Us. When you hear culture, what does that mean to you?
If I'm honest, it doesn't mean the same thing it used to.
Please, that honesty is what we need right now.
I think culture is like one of those.
Yeah, buzz term.
Yes. You know, for me, culture meant something different, right? It was a little bit more inclusive, you know? But again, now I don't know what it really means anymore, right? It's sort of lost its flavor, it's lost its meaning, it's lost its depth. I think, you know, too many people reach for that word to try to identify something or put something in context. What
did you once define it as? What did it once mean to you?
I think culture just really identified with sort of a unique conversation around who I am and who I identify myself as, right? As it relates to community, and, you know, any community, but like within hip hop culture, within, you know, arts culture, within music, film, whatever that is. But I think that, you know, it was a word used to identify, you know, sort of subgroups and folks that held sort of a deeper belief and meaning, you know, so, and you know, moved sort of with a different purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's I definitely agree and hear you on a number of those elements, and I think that's why these conversations are so important, because I feel like culture, as diluted as it's become in certain spaces, is still super important, because I think it's a through line of a number of things. I mean, a number of us have grown up in cultures, a number of us have helped shape cultures, but you're right, it's been taken by many and been diluted, stretched. But the hope is we can find some sense of what it means and now utilize it in all the right ways.
Sure.
It was amazing to see you at Art Basel. That was my first Art Basel.
Okay.
So the irony of seeing you in such a prominent position touched my heart. And I think it's no coincidence that art and culture are so closely attached, because I look at, you know, art as being something that has a great influence when it's made, but then also great influence years later.
Sure.
Very much like the responsibility we have with cultures.
Sure.
So what role do you think artists like yourself kind of play in shaping and guiding and pushing society in today's what we call culture?
It's a good question. I think it's the same as it's always been. When you look historically, right, at the forefront of any movement, behind that are the artists. You know, and I think that it's the same now in that way. However, again, the sort of over monetization of the word and the idea has diluted that a bit. But I think, you know, and then we don't necessarily, you know, we're not in the same space in terms of who we look towards for that sense of culture, that sense of identity, right? I think, you know, a lot of the people that are followed and the people that are sort of put up on that pedestal are not creatives, right? And
they're influencers who've been influenced by 100%. A check or a brand, which is wild. I'm sorry, please.
No, it's like the what is it, the I don't know. It's a revolving door, right? That's of the same thing. People that are influencers who've been influenced and will continue to be influenced by, you know, larger entities, checks, initiatives. But yeah, I think, artists have always sort of defined that, and you look at even to the point of like, real estate, right? Like the artist move into an area, the artist populate that space, the artist make it cool. Mm-hmm. The companies come in, they move in, they make the area unaffordable for the artist. Other people come in, populate the area for far more money, right? Like rent's jacked up, and then the artists have to go and sort of do the same thing all over again.
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and it happens everywhere. But I don't mean to sound bitter. I'm just, I think that like, now currently the role of the artist is in my opinion is more important than it ever has been.
Agree.
Because we need artists, right? Because, especially in a society facing this whole debate on, artificial intelligence and the manipulation of images and media, you need the truth. Mm-hmm. And, creators are the only ones that can sort of bring that truth forward, right? And, it's always an uphill battle. It's a struggle,
You're built for it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely built. Listen, I have no choice, right?
We do have choices. You've chosen.
Yes, I'm in it. I'm too deep in it. This is what I'm saying. Like,
I love that.
I'm already way off in the water. I'm not going back. I'm going forward.
No, listen, and talk about the water that you're in.
Yeah.
Because I think as you talk about that, I'd love to hear how you're remaining true to what you know is a responsibility right now and the need. You're right, of creatives to lead.
At the risk of sounding like an old head, right? Like I feel like tradition is one of the most powerful ideas that we have as a people, not just as Black people, but as people, as humans. And, I think that we're in a lot of ways, and this again could be just age or speaking from a certain perspective, but I feel like, when you lose a sense of tradition, we lose a sense of ourselves, and we slip sort of further and further away from,
home base.
And so I think that, for someone like myself, I can only speak or create from a place of honesty. And that place of honesty is a culmination of experience and just, again, sort of creating from a place of like, these are my collective memories. This is my collective experience, and understanding sort of where we've come from, and helping that, letting that help dictate where we're going to a greater degree.
So what was that one mindset shift that kind of changed things for you?
I think when I started to apply that mindset of like, fuck it, right? And not being afraid to fail, right? And I say it all the time, like, I failed my way to success. And I just wasn't afraid to, right? And it's like, I just being in a position to where I would always rather try than not, try and fail than have not tried at all.
Yeah, when I met you years ago, we worked together on a collaboration at Adidas. Thank you to Pharrell, my French cousin Loic, and BBC. I knew then the amazing creative that you were. What's the process in choosing who you work with, and your why? Because I think that also plays a key role in kind of how you just answered the last question, right? A lot of this journey you're not taking on your own. It comes with sometimes working with others. What's your process?
Well, it always has to sort of come from an honest place. Like, I don't, I'm not in the market to take on collabs that like are just for the money, right? Like as a person that's worked for a big brand, right? It's about like the effectiveness comes in the storytelling, right? And for me, it's a lot of that where like, the collaborations and the things that I've done in the past with bigger brands and companies, for me, it's like, what's the story between me and that product or me and that brand? And so, for Adidas, again, the correlation between like my upbringing in hip hop what Adidas meant, what Adidas means, was there. It was easy, right? And it's a product that I use and I wear and I believe in. So why not collaborate and try to make something, to elevate again my creativity, to stretch a little bit and do that thing. So I think it always sort of starts from there. Like, I'm not gonna put my name on something that I don't, really rock with.
Right. So as your work evolves and experiences continue to kind of shape your perspective, what topics or are there themes that you want to delve into or try to get more involved in?
Good question. I tend to play around with, in my work, I've dealt with themes of like, of heroism, of Afrofuturism, and this idea of like, I've said it a million times, but like empowerment over power, right? Because it's such a real thing, where we don't have, again, the stance on community is a lot different from when I grew up to what it is now, right? And I think that like, we don't have those icons anymore, those heroes anymore, and we've sort of we're left out to see without some sort of guidance for real. And again, not to say that we're completely lost or anything like that, but I just feel like a lot of the work and the attention that I put into the work in terms of thematics is like focusing on that and that level of like upliftment. And for me, I kind of unintentionally tapped into something where I think my work kind of generated a sense of like hope and wonder. And I think that once I kind of started to see that response that the work brought about in people, I really leaned into it. There is a bit of like a satirical side to the work. And I think as I get older, I try not to lose that, even though it's hard, right? It's harder to find hope. It's harder to stay and be optimistic at times, right? The older you get, the further the curtain gets kind of pulled back, right? The more you see, right? And so I think now, it's a bit of that, but I think it's stretching, right? It's as I've grown just as a man, as an artist, the work I think has grown both within the context of it and also the aesthetic. And, right now I've just been exploring a lot more different themes, but I feel like it's really important. It's a very well-known artist and collagist, Romare Bearden.
Oh, please, man. Yeah. Huge. So same Art Basel, they had a whole deal for Beard. I have a wild story. Can I jump in on this?
Please.
So growing up in New York City, apartment building, I had a gentleman, growing up in an apartment building, the family is the village that lives in the apartment building. You got the babysitter that might be on the 9th floor, or you might go stay with your friend on the 10th floor with his parents, whatever. But there was a gentleman, Russell Goings, who I would never forget. One of the smartest men I've ever known in my life. Wise. And he was an art collector.
Okay.
And so now I'm talking my youthful years. So this is 90s, 80s. And he would talk about, and he would have art all over his apartment, all over the place. Come to find out, he was like best friends with Romare Bearden. And he has one of the deepest collections of pieces and artifacts from Bearden. And I didn't even get the gist of it then. But he would always school me and educate me on art because I also went to high school for art. So this was a piece that he helped inject in me of getting familiar with a prominent Black artist. And just when I think about Bearden and I think about his use of collage, because that was his specialty, I look at how that correlates into collaborations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because when you look at collages, how do you bring all these different materials and things together to work to create something new and special? So as you just mentioned that, and then going back to Art Basel, where they now finally I'm hoping the Romare Bearden story is going to be told.
Yeah.
And more people learn about him. But I love that you just shared that. So please go on, because you pinched a nerve, because not a lot of people know about Romare Bearden. And then I had the fortune of growing up in a building where one of his best friends.
Yeah, you had a seat.
No, he's like grabbing pieces and showing me on the ground, and I'm like, okay. And now I'm like, damn, I wish I'd have known really then. Mm-hmm. But that's life.
we all have those moments. I wish I would have known.
Right,
man,
like, please. Yeah. So go ahead. So you're bringing up Bearden.
Well, I was bringing up Bearden just for the fact of, like, there's a quote that I'm going to butcher, but the effectively to surmise it is like, an artist is basically the sort of griot of their time, right? They are the storyteller of their time. The work that they do is representative of that time in which they existed in. And so for me, as an artist that's known for, sort of reaching back in history and then moving past history to sort of a future context and then more of a fantastical sort of approach in certain aspects, I kind of, have been more focused on right now. And so I think that, like, I don't think, but a lot of the work that I've been really interested in doing speaks to now versus here, then there, over here. It's right now, because I feel like, we're living in a very, very interesting time, and, we gotta talk about it. We gotta have some conversations.
But that's tough, because a couple of things when you talk about the right now is constantly changing every day. Mm-hmm. So how is that staying right now? But to the point of not living in the future, not living in the past, because I can even think for myself, and I'm sure for you, life feels like it's so much faster now.
Way faster.
Like children, everything. And I think it's because we're always looking towards that next milestone.
Yeah.
And by putting something on that next milestone, you're now eliminating everything that's happening in between. So it's like this fast forward. Mm-hmm. So it seems like, because I feel like it was just yesterday that I was celebrating last year's New Year's, not this one, last year's, because it's all so fast. So how do you discipline yourself to truly stay in the now and create in that space? Because that's tough.
It is. I think one of the cheat codes is that, I create fast, right? And so it is more of like, it's like journaling in a diary, and these pieces that I've been working on definitely represent moments. To me, at least, they represent certain moments, of this second half of my journey. But the idea is to not be so precious in terms of my execution and output, DJ Jazzy Jeff, I heard him say, like, on a podcast, he was talking about, as it pertained to, like, producers, right? And he was saying, you don't want to, like, die and leave, a legacy or your albums on a computer.
Because you didn't want to release them because they weren't perfect.
Right. And, like, die empty. And so that I don't know, that just really struck a chord with me. And it might not necessarily be the best advice, but I think that, I have a lot to say. I'm interested in a lot, right? And, I don't want to, be facing my maker at any point feeling, full and feeling like there's still so much I have to do. I mean, there will always be those things, but
correct.
But ultimately, I think when it comes to my craft, I want to put it all out there.
And so that's what helps you to get things out in a timely fashion.
Yes.
You spoke on something just now, or alluded to, interesting times.
Yes.
And given the state of things, we're in very interesting times. What are you doing specifically to kind of ensure that the cultures and the spaces that you frequent are being nurtured properly? And what would you recommend for other creatives and consumers to do in these very interesting times?
That's a good question. I think for me, at least, it more now than at any point in my journey, I've been really focused on community. And, I say community, I mean, those that do what I do or something adjacent, right? Building and nurturing a tribe in that way, and checking in on other creatives, my people, having dialogues with them. I think that that's a way through. If we're all talking, right? If we're all in dialogue, learning from one another, different experiences and so forth, is hypercritical, right? To understand what's going on in certain spaces and not leave that up to social media to dictate the times and where people are going and where things are headed. Because again, like I say, like I'm a firm believer that, artists and creatives, we dictate the culture and what's to come, 1,000%. Right?
1,000%.
And I've just, I'm curious to understand and know what this person over here is thinking and what they're focused on and, what's interesting them right now and, versus this one over here. And, it's that level of information, I think, that helps all of us grow, right? Because at the end of the day, like we're all creatives. We're not in competition with one another. The competition is inward, not outward. And we all have a responsibility to, the greater narrative. And so for me, it's been really fun because being a creative, man, you can be a hermit, and it's easy. Before you know it, like, weeks, months go past, you haven't heard from this person or you haven't reached out or, it starts lifing, right? And, I just feel like it's just important, man. Like, we're starting to, I'm getting to the age too where like you start losing people, right? Losing, family, losing friends, losing idols, right? Heroes. And so, it's really important to, to keep and foster that sense of like community. Yeah.
I think part of, that question of the interesting times, DE&I now is become has been a topic. And when looking at how that really ended up helping white women more than any other group, what are the things we need to now ensure that diversity is reflected in the spaces that we've shaped over decades of time?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. I think Kneejerk Response is like, it feels like that's a thing that starts top down, less bottom up. I think that, Pharrell spoke about it, just in the sense of those that are sort of in power or have a semblance of power that are, people of color that have come from certain backgrounds, like, collectivizing, right? And that's always been a conversation, right? And, we have spurts and we have moments, right? But the hardest thing for us to do is like, pull in. Consistently, right? There's so many different, there's so many other groups that do it well, right? Through time and creation. But like, I think we have such a hard time with it, but that goes back to our history and, so forth.
It's so many layers. And I even look at, things like fasting, right? And in seasons of fasting, which obviously could be more than food, alcohol, and social media and all that, I look at, is there like a communal fast that you would advocate we move to help us get even more clarity, alignment, focus, consistency?
Social media, 1,000%.
Why did I think you were going to say that, bro? 1,000%. Speak on it.
It runs our life. That algorithm runs our life. We can't find our way without it. It's become so habitual that, like, again, you find yourself doom scrolling without even realizing you're doing it, right? And you've already sucked in. That's 15 minutes going by your life, right?
Time is everything.
It's everything. I have young kids, and it's really hard to find that balance and strike that balance with them, to keep them off of tablets and so forth, right? But, it's that thing where like we're really adamant about how often they're able to use, not without a lack of, them whining or complaining or asking for it. But I think that, like, for as long as I can regulate that for them, because I noticed that, without that, what they go to is like, my daughter reads. You know what I mean? She'll pick up the book, or she'll pick up the pencil or the pen, right? Write a story, start to do some illustrations, paintings, right? And there's a whole nother world if I just look up, right? And we all about to, it's like the de-evolution too, which is so funny to me, because that evolutionary like chart where it's like monkey, Cro-Magnon man to, it's like we're going backwards. Right? Because
so
everybody's going to be like this
Yep.
in a few years. They're going to have back problems, hunched over, staring into your phone.
Wow.
So yeah, man, I don't know.
Yo, you just threw quite the image in my head that you're right. Like literally,
Yeah.
So give me your perspective on AI and how it's affected creatives to date, and how you might even see it affecting creatives moving forward.
We're doomed, man. Terminated. End of days. No, honestly, I don't know. I think it's alarming in certain aspects, and then in others, I can see certain benefits. It's something that I don't think I know. I know a little bit, but I don't know enough about to speak on, just in terms of the potential applications that exist right now. Right? I see the helpfulness that it can sort of bring for certain things, but I think the thing that I fear is the level of immediacy that it allows for, and with that, with us becoming more and more dependent upon machines and computers, we become further detached from the human side of things. And that can also bleed into making, right? Art making and aesthetics. And so I think that, like, if we are, so reliant upon the immediacy of creation, our aesthetics will suffer.
So listen, for the next generation of creatives, what would you tell them that you wish somebody would have shared with you earlier in your career?
A lot, actually. Financial literacy is one for sure. I think understanding the game, understanding what to do when you do first get a few dollars, right? Tomorrow is not guaranteed, and we're not in the space where every 2 weeks we're getting a check, And so to understand how to budget for your life is really important. And I think the only other thing I would just say is that, there is no other secret to the success of being an artist other than you have to work your ass off to find your voice. It's experimentation. You have to mix this thing with this to see how it works. And then let me record the results. All right, that works. I'm gonna take this now. I'm gonna rework the equation. And so, you have to just work your ass off, right? And you can't get discouraged by somebody else's expectation of your vision.
That sounds like a bar and a gem in general of you have to define what success is. And you have to be unapologetic about that and not allow for the programming or the society to define that for you. Because that's going to send you in a total spiral. Have you defined what success looks like for you?
I have. I think, for me, success has changed, right? That the definition. And I think right now, success is what I found. I got health, I've got wealth, I have love around, and that's success, bro. Success is being able to pay your mortgage on time. Right? Like, family can eat, kids can go to private school, get a good education. Like, that's success to me. It's not about the other side of, like, the glitz and glamour, being seen, being known, access to certain things. That's for me. That's
Right,
me personally. I just think that that's it. Like when I started out on this journey many, many years ago, if I'm gonna name drop real quick,
please.
right? I spent one of the most amazing evenings with Jeffrey Wright and Mos Def. This was years and years ago. And I was just like, man, a sponge. I was just asking them brothers. I mean, I know they were tired of me, right? But I asked them 1.5 million questions. And, one of the things that Mos said that was one of the simplest things was like, when he first, started rhyming and doing all this, all he ever wanted to do, right, was be in a position where throughout his entire life, he can just make dope shit.
Okay.
And I was like, that is, as simple as that is, that's not easy to do.
No.
Right? To live your life and furnish your life by your creations alone and not have to depend upon others and other sources to help, feed your family.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, I just held that. And again, it's not that profound, but it was just like, that's all I want to do. I just want to make shit that I think is dope. And hopefully other people will sort of gravitate to. And that can help sustain my life, my lifestyle. And that's it. And so for me, that's success, man. That's success.
And it's inspiring.
Yeah.
It's inspiring because when people start to live by that, I think we start breaking down the barriers of the programming or what the definition of success has been put in us to think it is, right? And it sounds freeing. Most of us got to be one of the freest people.
100%.
Like his spirit and just that sentiment is super freeing. And to be honest, that probably unlocked the freedom in you to be who you are to date.
It did. What uncomplicated the pursuit.
Boom.
Right? It's like, oh yeah, I guess it is.
That's simple. Can be that simple. Let's make it that simple. What do you think is a thing that separates creatives that make it to the ones that don't?
Heart. It's a very vulnerable thing to put yourself and your creativity out there, to be consumed and, digested by the world. And, to do that, you gotta have heart.
Well, listen, I mean, we could do this for days. We always end this by asking, what are the 3 seeds you'd want to leave with the stewards of culture moving forward? So the 3 key things, and again, you've dropped so much, but if there are 3 things that you would say, here are the things that I think for us to be in good hands of those who are going to help nurture and shape this culture as we know it moving forward, that we need to get back. You're 1,000% correct, as you started with.
At least 2 that come to mind is like cultivation and openness. And openness being, sharing, not gatekeeping. I didn't get here by myself.
Nope.
And, no one gets there alone. And I think that, a bit of that, those particular people that helped me, that openness that they showed, that ability that like them pulling me up, I think that's always important. And again, like we have to kind of cultivate our own and again, community, man, community.
No, I thank you for that. And I thank you for being a reflection of all this. And I mean, I know I've told you, and I started this about how proud and excited I was to see you continue to evolve in this space. And we need more of you. We need more of you being example. We need more of you sharing. We need more of you stretching yourself into spaces that God is going to cover. And I'm so glad you're in a place of putting your work out.
Yeah.
Just putting it out. You're not sitting with it. Like, I look forward to you being empty. And I thank you for that, bro.
I appreciate that. For sure.
Thank you for that, bro.
For sure. Love.
We truly appreciate your support because it helps us fulfill our mission of promoting cultural awareness and personal development. Please click the subscribe button below to help ensure and solidify our mission.